Slides here of how I got into carving, and then I'm going to go into some of my tips. And a couple guys had asked about my mobiles that I had here last year, and I'll give you some stuff on that. So you can hit the next slide and we'll get into how things got started. My wife and I, we live a pretty simple lifestyle. Like, we grow all our own food, and we have an orchard, a garden, we have blackberries, strawberries, raspberries, grapes. We grow hops to make beer. We raise steers and goats and stuff, and chickens and turkeys. So when we got married, we went to log building school in Minnesota. We took a 10-day class up in Ely. It's Great Lakes School of Log Building, and they're still up there doing it. And that enabled us to build a house cheap. And this is actually building a log shelter for the Appalachian Trail. You can go to the next one here. And the thing is, when you go to log building school, it's all chainsaw work. This is Scandinavian scribe fit. And so before I was into chainsaw carving, this is where I got used to using a chainsaw. You can go to the next one. Carving grooves and notches, it's the same techniques that you use, carving. You're using brushing techniques, you're using a lot of flattening, smoothing. You're not using carving bars. I didn't know anything about that, but you can go to the next one. There's some more log building ones. But yeah, this is a shelter. On the Appalachian Trail, they have shelters for the hikers, and my wife and I had hiked the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine, and we're big in the hiking community, so every now and then we build a shelter with the hiking club. And here you can see these notches. That's so simple for chainsaw carvers to be log builders. You'd think there'd be more. Now that I have carving skills to think about being a log builder, you could put logs in there that have branches coming out and have all kinds of animals carving in. I'm just hoping my kids want a log house someday so I can really make it work hard. Okay, next one. Our first building we built was a log sauna to practice, and the saunas are great for carvers and log builders. When you work outside like this all day and then go into 180 degrees at night and soak your tired muscles, it's great. So we still use this wood sauna.
How's it heated?
It's a wood stove. We cut all our own firewood. We don't have central heat. In the first 8 years we didn't even have plumbing. So you can go to the next one. This is our log house. It's took us like 4.5 years to build it. That was part-time. I was working a full-time job at the time, and we took the summer off 1 year to hike 800 miles into California. But it's cheap, $20,000, and that includes the well, the septic. We did everything but the excavating and drilling the well. The next one, please. If you're a young carver starting out and you don't want to spend a lot of money for a house, it's a way to do it. You got your saws already. Okay, next one. I haven't had a full-time job for like 25 years, even though I work all the time. Like I said, I spend a lot of time growing our food. I'm a woodworker. You can go to the next one.
Did you make that iron?
Yeah, next one. I'm a blacksmith.
Oh, nice.
And I was thinking about this, like, I'm a house painter and a carpenter too, and any time I don't have work, say in the winter, I can stockpile carvings and go in the forge, and right now I got a little tendonitis in my left hand from carving. I go to the blacksmith shop, start pounding metal, and I get tendonitis in this arm. So you get up in the morning and you think, well, what hurts today, and I just go do the other thing. Go to the next one. More blacksmithing. I think I got one more blacksmith shop.
What's the scale of that, Todd?
It's a chandelier. It's about this big around. Candelabra. Yeah, I like blacksmithing, but that's dirtier than chainsaw. And in 2005 or 6, my wife's a travel writer, so she had to come up here and do a story about Ridgway. So I think it was for Pennsylvania Magazine. So she came up and she interviewed a bunch of carvers, and that went into Pennsylvania Magazine. I think she also did one for fine woodworking, and interviewed a bunch of carvers. But she was talking to Liz and Rick, and they, I don't know if it was Cindy or Liz said, well, how about doing an article on Appalachian Art Studio? And that was in 2007, so they invited us up, my whole family, my 2 kids, and we spent a day or 2 there, and the kids did clay, and we all did printmaking, and Rick took me out and did a 2 or 3 hour owl, you know, and I had my chainsaw skills from log building, and Rick would set up, and he just made a cut, and I made a cut, and I didn't know whether I was cutting the beak or the ear or what, you know. I just made the same cuts, and it was like half done before I realized what I was really making. But he just lit the fire, and I just kept carving ever since. Next one. Yeah, so that's Al, first Al there, and like I said, Rick really carved it. I mean, I just worked the chainsaw. I didn't know what I was doing. So here I have it. I'm going to run through about 15 pictures of different birds that I do, and then I'll get into different, how I do my feathers and stuff like that. I guess if you got questions about them, I'm just going to pretty much roll through these to get you an idea of what I do, because I'll describe most of my techniques later on. I do a lot of owls. I've been doing a lot of birds. Because I live right near Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, and there's a, you know, in the fall, that place is loaded with hawks and eagles and stuff, and they have a couple art shows during the year, and I figured, well, if you're going to go to Hawk Mountain, you better have hawks. And like the first year I went there, I had my generic hawk, and I brought it there, and everyone's like, well, what kind of hawk is that? I'm like, yeah, you're the birder, you tell me what the hawk looks like. You know, and then you know, I started really studying hawks, you know, so now when I do them, you know, these are broad wings, you know, I look for the barring patterns on the feathers and stuff, so, you know, you get when you got birders, you know, they want to make sure it's the right bird. Next one, please. This is the last eagle that I did, and I belong to an art co-op, and the one guy that started it with us, he's a painter, but he's a volunteer at Hawk Mountain, so he knows his birds. Him and I would, when I brought up bird, he'd say, oh yeah, that looks like, you know, well, like here he'd say the eagle, and he'd count my tail feathers, and he'd go, well, you know, you only have 6 tail feathers. He said, an eagle has 12. So now when I cut my feathers, it's like 1, 2, 3, you know, make sure I get my 12 tail feathers. Not that you have to do that, but I try to go for it, although I gotta ask them, because when you look at the patterns, the top feather's always on top, and if you have an even number, it only makes 11, so I don't know where that 12th feather's supposed to be. I gotta ask them about that, because I can't really see it in a lot of the books I have. Next one. Turkeys. I just started doing turkeys like a year ago. And, well, raising turkeys a couple of times, it really helps. That's why I got into roosters and chickens, because I raised roosters and chickens. But next one, please. What's fun, you know, I just love doing the barring patterns on the feathers. That's what I've been getting into lately. Next one. Being a furniture maker, I thought, well, let's start doing some furniture. And these are red-tail hawks. I did this one for Addison last year, and I really think I want to start doing more bars and tables and things like that. It's just a lot of fun for me to work furniture, and my biggest problem is just so big and bulky to move around and drag around places. But
what finish are you putting on these things?
well, most of the stuff I do, I try, being a painter, I like to put on like exterior deck stains, and I like oils, and like some stuff I'll put on marine varnish and stuff. Depends a lot. A lot of people put stuff inside. If I know someone's going inside, I put different stuff on, but depends where people are putting stuff. Next, please. Next, please. Herons, I do a ton of herons. I think the heron was the next thing I did after I was up at Ridgway with Rick, and then I think the next year I came back, I was doing herons for a while, and you know, I used to like plunge in right to those legs, you know, and get them right down there first thing, and it was like, that was always a mistake, because that's where you always find the knots, you know. So I finally learned that you never commit on those legs early on, but I love doing you know, herons, just those S necks and the crown feathers and the long beak, and you know, like a lot of my feathers on my birds and stuff, they're really thin and fragile. That's part of the problem as far as transporting them and stuff. I end up building a lot of crates because I don't like breaking feathers and beaks off. You know, I rarely break anything, but you got to really be careful. I mean, if you broke something off, you could cut that beak off and stick a new one in out of oak or something, you know. But I do a lot of beaks, cross grain and stuff, and you know, if you're careful, you don't break them off. You know, it's pretty tough. I just like the thinness of those feathers, you know, so paper thin that they look like a feather. Next, please. And chickens, I started doing roosters, and now that's what everyone thinks. That's all they think I can do, so I do roosters. But, you know, I've been working these legs down, and you can get those legs pretty thin. You know, I go for around 3/4 of an inch, but you got to really finish the whole top half of that bird, you know, because you don't want to be vibrating on those little legs at the end. And you know, just yesterday I started. It was the first time I put spurs on, and like from now on, every rooster I do is going to have spurs on. So you can always keep adding more and more detail on it. Next. Just another rooster.
That was Addison. No?
Yeah, I don't know. That was a chicken bench I did. I don't know where I had it. I haven't had that around a while. Finally got rid of it. These little hens, those are really quick to do. And you know, these feathers, they're just perfect for a chainsaw. And being so frugal in everything I do, you know, if I get a big log, you know, I had this log, I carved my rooster. I only wanted to carve a rooster on a stand. You know, I get done, I have this much log left. I can't let anything go to waste. So I started carving that little coop box. Well, that was a mistake. Carving that hen in there, that was more work than the rooster. But yeah, I hate to see wood go to waste. Next, please. Yeah, that's what I did another one of my auction pieces, pretty similar to this. Next, please. Okay, so, like Cheryl said, references. I just go through references in books all the time. This is a great one on hawks. He's got another one on owls, which I don't have, but, you know, whenever, even now, after doing tons and tons of birds, I still page through and flag all my books. You know, I'll go out there and carve a red-tailed hawk, and I'll have 3 books with 20 flags on them. So I know when I get to the beak, I go to this one. When I go to, you know, anything that I want to do on that. So I go to the next page. This book is great because feather detail. They got every bird with different feathers. You know, I want to know which way. You know, I used to just carve feathers, and it was like, well, which way do they overlap? You know, I didn't know whether they overlaid like this on the top of the wing or on the bottom of the wing. And so, not that you have to carve them that way, but if I have a bird in flight and I can get my saw at the right angle, I'm going to carve the overlap of the feathers correct. You know, on something where you can't get under, like a rooster, I always end up carving them backwards because it's easier, it looks just as good, but it's really not the way it should be. Next, please. You know, look at the, you know, if you really want to get into perfect feather sizes of what on where at on the wing, and you know, it's good reference points for how many primary feathers there are on the bird. Next, please. And this book, I think, is mainly meant for well, I guess like painters or hand wood carvers. So they have all these diagrams, which, you know, exactly the same for carving in a log, you know, even if you just want to get that slight indent for the eye there. Although he puts his eyes in later, drills them in and builds them up out of plexi. So if you're going to have it carved in there, you got to leave a little bulge in that socket. But next, please. Carving wings. Okay. Like I said, this is the last bird I carved, and like when I block it out, I have my wings. I'll have a pretty thick plank, like maybe 4 or 5 inches thick, just to get that the wing blocked out. But I don't want to have a straight wing. I want these curves in here. I want these nice S curves in there. So I'll start carving away and to get the wing thickness down, and also create this illusion. When you look at the front of this, it looks like it's thin, but you can see the top of the wing, and at places you can see the back of the wing. And depending on how that S is, that way you can't tell how thick that wing is. That wing is actually maybe 3 or 3.5 inches thick, but it looks like, you know, a bird wing that might only be 1.5 inches thick, by tapering those edges at different angles, and it gives it that natural curve. Next, please. Yeah, so, you know, when I'm carving, I'm constantly feeling with my hands how thick it is, because I can't even see because of the way it's being tapered. But if you put your hands together, you can kind of gauge how far apart your fingers are. Next. Carving feathers. Yeah, everyone carves feathers differently. Like I said, here I'm probably trying to go for the overlay, and like when it's in flight, I do try to separate those primary feathers so you can, you know, the thing is, if it's in flight, you got the grain going in the right direction a lot of times, but you've got to be careful if you're going cross grain with those feathers. You know, you can still take them pretty thin, but once again, it's the same with the wing. That feather might be 1 inch thick or 3/4 of an inch thick, but if you taper those edges down, you can disguise the thickness of those feathers pretty easily. Next, please. Yeah, not much more to say about that. Next, please. If you got questions, you can yell them out, but I don't have much to say. Everyone has their own little way of carving. feathers. I really like going in with my angle sanders and with die grinder for feathers. I really love my angle sander because I love getting those paper thin edges, because you'll see later on when I get into burning, I like to burn the edges of them. Next, please. Yeah, so I'll go over a lot of the feathers. I'll come in on the top surface, and then I'll use that edge of that sander and really cut in underneath it to get those tight edges, to get rid of those chainsaw cut marks. Next, please. The thing is, I find, since I don't carve full time, I usually carve whenever I have a day or something. I'll carve 2 or 3 hours, you know. So I have a lot of time to let stuff sit, because I don't like carving when the logs are green and wet. If you know, I like carving green logs, of course, but even if you let them sit for 2 days, or, you know, I usually have the leisure to let them sit a week or two, and then it's so much easier to sand, and you get not much cleaner lines. You don't go through sandpaper as much, and so I tend to leave things sit after I get them carved out. Next, please. And die grinders. I only have a couple bits, die grinder bits, and I guess I use like the flame bit. I use like a medium flame bit and a small flame bit. And like where the feathers, I have a hard time seeing this, where the feathers are, a lot of times I can't get the chainsaw mark right up in underneath, and I like running that real thin, went right up underneath. I think it just completes the feather much, gets it sticking underneath the previous row of feathers. Next, please. Next. Same way with the neck feathers. Like I'll run that die grinder in there to get up underneath, just kind of separate the cape a little bit from the back of the bird. Oh, now tail feathers. Yeah, like I said, you know, Dave told me to count those 12 feathers out. But yeah, I don't carve a lot of big logs, since I have a pickup and a trailer, but usually it's just myself and my own muscle power to get the logs and to move them if my son's not around. So a lot of times what I'll do is put those, to get a bigger bird in a smaller log, a lot of times I stick, you know, cut a groove in there and stick the tail feathers, chunk of wood in there for the tail feathers, you know. Gives you that grain going in the right direction, get tougher feathers that way, and you can really thin them down a lot more, because if that was cross grain and you were trying to go thin, those things would break off. So that's a pretty common way to get a bigger bird in a small log. And once again, the overlay of those feathers, you know, like that, I get like the nice arch in the tail feathers. You know, when they're perched, that's the thing, when they're spread open, you can kind of count those feathers. When they're perched and they're all bunched up, you know, you just make a couple lines. You can't really count them, but next, please. Roosters, I kind of just, you know, like I said, before you get too thin on these legs, I just bring the saw around and cut in. I like really cutting in on these back feathers and plunging into its butt there, you know, because it's all just a bunch of loose hanging feathers, and the chainsaw is great for making the back of that chicken look real. Next. That's the Heron's favorites. Next, please. I don't know why I got stuff in. I don't have pictures of everything. That's a thing. But yeah, herons, you know, they got such nice long feathers, and you know, and it, you know, if you got that heron attached to a log anyway, those two legs are more, you know, you don't even need two legs. So I want to start having that foot coming out of the water, and you know, you can. That's always what grabs people's attention. Oh, how can you cut such thin legs? Well, not really. Those legs aren't doing anything on a herring because it's being held up by the log. Next, please. Burning techniques. Yeah, I do a lot of burning. I really don't paint much. And I don't know, I wouldn't even call it burning. I'd call it scorching. If I can get away, you know, this is like some rooster feathers, and that's just scorched, just enough so that some of the growth rings catch up. And sometimes that's the best way to get some, you know, it's so simple, but it looks so good. But that there, I think you really do need a drier log, because sometimes if you're carving green, I go out there with a torch, and usually I just use a handheld little thing. I don't use one of those big meat things unless I'm doing something like a bear, because I want to dictate. I want to just light up certain areas, and I want to pinpoint where I darken things. So I really like just scorching and not burning it. Next, please. Well, here I burn the whole wing, and then I come back and remove it with some sanders and stuff. That's fun too, but I thought it was another photo. The next one I think is a turkey or something. No, just another same technique. Burn it, take it back off again. That's what my wife always says. All you do is burn and sand and burn and sand. You just put it on, take it off. Put it on, take it off.
Todd, and then do you just use a hand paintbrush to dab on the barring?
The barring? No, that's just all burned, and then I just sand it off. And then usually, if it's like that, then a lot of times I'll put on like a coat of marine varnish, and that locks on that charring pretty good. You know, I mean, if it's out in the weather forever, it's all going to turn gray, but you know, it really does lock it in pretty good. Next, please. I want to show you these turkey feathers. You know, this is still the same techniques. Next, please. Yeah, and my die grinder, I usually use those sanders. I really keep a minimal of tools, you know. I only have 5 saws, and that's a lot. To me, simple is better. Next. Here's what I wanted to talk about is turkey feathers. Like here, I burned it, and then I went back with the die grinder to take it off. But what really I love is the backside of this bird, which you don't see. I'm going to show you the next photo. This is just scorched. These are all the growth rings. And if you look at a turkey feather, that's almost identical. You know, if you can just scorch those feathers and highlight those growth rings, and then I think I put a little bit of light brown stain on there, those are like perfect turkey feathers. And you don't need to go to the trouble to even put those barring patterns on them with die grinders and sanders. I think I got a closer view of it. Yeah, because that, you know, that was cut in, you know, the turkey was kind of cross-angled on a big log. So, perfect. Take advantage of those growth rings. Next. Beaks, talons, and eyes. Yeah, and a lot of my beaks, you know, I can carve them in with a chainsaw if I have to, but I'd rather leave a little bit more there and just sand it in with my angle sander. I can get a much nicer beak, and you know, I can, well, first of all, most of my birds are actual size. If I do a larger than life eagle or something, it's a lot easier to do it with a chainsaw. But if you're doing a normal sized chicken or You know, you got to really be careful going across that cross grain with your chainsaw. So if I'm allowed to use electric or have my sander with me, I prefer to sand that in, because on most of the roosters and eagles that are actual size, like that 4.5-inch sander, man, that you can get that right in there, that the mouth there on the beak. Perfect. Cut that in right on the edge of the sander. Next, please. Yeah. Once again, you know, the beaks do get fragile on. You got to be careful moving them around. Next, please. Oh, I couldn't even tell what it is. Yeah, like I was saying, yeah, that beak of that turkey, that angle sander, that just goes right in there. And let me look at this. Yeah, and the eyes, I got some more pictures of eyes, but the eyes at Addison like 3 or 4 years ago, I think I used to just take like a flame bit and try to go around, and I'd spend like half an hour, and Ed said, yeah, why don't you try my eyeball tools? Well, I think I used his eyeball tools more that weekend than him. And so when I went back, Ed told me to get them on the internet, and so I ordered them, but they never came. I think the guy went out of business. And they're hard to find, so being a blacksmith, I kind of have enough metal skills that I got some Harbor Freight rasp bits. I think they're coming up here, and I'll show you how I did them. But I just love coming in there with those eyeball tools, and you can use the rest of the rasp bit to kind of create the socket. What used to take me 20 minutes on an eyeball, now I can do in like 30 seconds. Next, please. Oh, and I think here I would just, it's not a very good shot, but the beak, I like coming in under with like a flame bit on the die grinder to like pop that beak out a little more. And the same way on the talons. Once again, this is tough to see, but the talons, I like taking that bit. You know, if it's at a place where people look at it, try to get that front talon just with a bit to free it up. Once again, if you're doing a larger than life, you can get in there with a chainsaw, but you're doing a little thing on like a small bird. That's a little thing to get in. You got to get in there with a die grinder. Next, please. Yeah, it's hard for me to see. Yeah, that's with an eyeball tool. Yeah, now here I started using like a bigger, like a 1/2-inch eyeball tool. And what's nice about those is when you start to put them in, they start to burn themselves, and sometimes that's all you need, and then you go down to the next size smaller and go in there, and you can create, that circle in the eye. Next, please. I think I got a close-up. Yeah. I love eyeball tools.
Can I get my original back, Todd? It's only been 4 years.
Yeah, those are just the cheap Harbor Freight bits, and you just either drill in the end or grind in the end. This one here, I just took one of those bits and heated it up and mushroomed it out in the forge and created it. It's slightly off-center, but it's big enough that you can do like a bear eye or a fox eye with it. But I think it's John over there. He does have some eyeball tools. They're a little bit different than mine. I have the rasp part, which I love. Next, please. And this is what a lot of people were asking me about is my mobiles. I think from here and at Addison, the first one I made was a Canada Goose, and the body's separate in the wings, and then they're attached by eyelets and eye hooks. And so when you pull this, that bird flaps its wings, and it's just great, especially on herons. They're just real graceful movements. And I usually have a tripod at my stand, And what's nice is if it's windy, that bird will just fly all day in the wind. And it just draws people in. They love to pull it. They love to see them fly. And so I made this for, you know, my dad had one out of cardboard years ago. So, you know, and then he made one out of like 3/4 inch pine boards. And I started thinking, I thought, wow, it probably isn't going to work, but I wonder if it'll work full size. And I thought the body would be way too heavy. But when I started playing around with it, I carved it. I left it dry because the weight's real crucial. And when you start changing these hanging points, you know, I was thinking maybe if it's carved totally out of a green log and it's from the same log, you might be able to hang it green and have it balance out. But when it would dry, the wings would dry first, quicker than the body, so then the wings would come up for a period of time. But I think it would even out. I haven't ever experimented. I always just carve them in the fall, leave them in the house all winter long till they're bone dry, and then do the finishing and assembling. But the next shot I think I have with goose. But I like the long necks and the heron with the long feet. A couple people say, well, you should do an eagle. You know, they don't have either of those features, and I like the graceful patterns. One guy said about doing a turkey, and turkeys do have pretty cool bodies. I think it would look good, but turkeys, when they fly, they don't fly graceful. They're usually like a basketball flying in. And so a turkey would be fun to try, but with those big bodies, I think you'd really have to beef up your wings. But when I carve them out, I think the next picture will show this. I like carving the wings together just because it's a bigger piece of wood, and it being from the same piece of wood, I'm more guaranteed for even weight, because you don't want one like real knotty. You want everything to be pretty even for doing the weight, because when you start balancing stuff, like the first time I put one together, you know, it kind of went together fairly easy, and I did it, and I said, wow, I said, I can mass produce these things, cut down the size, because the first one I think was 4-foot body, 6-foot wingspan. I said, I'll cut it down like a foot, crank them out, and I'll be able to drop my price in half. And the second one took me 3 times as long to hang, because that's when I lucked out on the first one, when I started realizing how critical balance is, weight is, and placing those eyelets. And if you get the eyelets in slightly cropped, not centered on that body, then the wings, that you'll go one pull, it'll fly, and then it'll start to do this here, and I can't have that. And so I started finding out you need to build jigs and try to get the balance points, and it really becomes a nightmare. Everyone says, oh, I'm going to go make those, and not, you know, the one carver said he made one, he was pretty happy with it, but I haven't seen a lot of them flying up here yet. But it's worth a try. It's just be prepared for a nightmare of trying to hang it. Next, please. Yeah, I just detail the wings and the body. I mean, carving, it's the easy part. You know, you're just carving the body, carving the wings. Like I said, I like to leave them dry. I think that's kind of critical. And then play around hanging them. I like weigh each wing, you know, trim them down, you know, everything I can to try to balance and keep them even. Next, please. And like I said, you got a pull string. The hinge points, I just found eyelets. You screw one eyelet, 2 eyelets into the body, and then, you know, then I use like eye hooks for the wings, so you can loop them in and then crimp them shut. But when you crimp them shut, it needs to be round. If they're slanted, sometimes that jams. So you really need to be careful on your hardware attachment. I mean, there might be other hardware out there, but, you know, I haven't found it. I usually kind of make my own hardware sometimes. And then I use like 16th inch cable and clamps. And that's the other thing is, you got like $25, $30 in hardware, cables and clamps and screw eyes, so you can't be like crimping it together and oh, it don't fly right, because then you got to cut everything off and do it again. So like I said, I go through with string and then redo it, and it's time consuming. And usually I used to just do a stick across there, but being a blacksmith now I do like twisted hooks and stuff. But you know, they pull the crowds in, and I like them. They're fun to do. I think that's it. I think there's no more. Try the next one. Yep, that's it.
Awesome.